What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to Powered by Primus, and today is going to be a podcast. Now, I know a lot of people have been requesting it, so we're going to be jumping into it, and I wanted to make sure that we jumped into it with a really special guest. So today I'm going to be sitting down with Matt Smith from the Wizards team, who's on more the design side, and it's going to be really awesome getting to know him far more, as well as asking some awesome questions about the Transformers TCG. Now, our intro did get messed up just a little bit because of some corruption. However, we started out by me asking him, when it comes to designing a set, how do you guys even begin the process? Now, with all that being said, let's get into the video.
That's similar to why we did Siege, even though doing Siege also was really good for me. It made things a lot easier because a lot of like aesthetic based things were already determined, and like half the roster was already determined, right? So it's kind of a shortcut for me.
No, absolutely, yeah. Well, it's one thing that I'll admit, I had no idea you guys were going to jump into it that fast, as well as dive as deep as you guys have into the lore for some of the stuff, where even I'm like, I didn't even know about that character, and then I even have to go and look it up. I think it's super, super awesome. So it's not so mainstream, the same 5 characters that are, very well known. You guys have definitely done a really good job to bring out some of that other stuff, which is really, really awesome.
Thank you. It's a tough balancing act because we know that every booster could be somebody's first. It's kind of the issue that comics have where it's like they want to prepare for the newcomer, and we know that the newcomer is probably going to have a better time if they happen to open an Optimus Prime or a Megatron or something. So
yeah,
that's why you keep seeing
these
characters, because we gotta give a portion of each of the set to that sort of player.
Yeah.
But set 5 is almost entirely new characters, so we still look for opportunities to do that and to satiate all the existing players.
Well, and the really fun part about it is it also opens the door for you to be able to play different Optimus Primes, for instance, or if there's one that specifically has a playstyle that you more relate to, it doesn't feel like every character that has come out with the Optimus name on there has the same feeling. They're all really different as well, so like you don't lock yourself in with like re-releasing the same character over and over and over, which is really, really awesome.
Oh, absolutely. We hope so. And we never put out a Optimus or a Megatron or a Bumblebee thinking this is going to replace the last one.
Yeah.
Like, that's not at all the intent. Though there is a little bit of tension when it comes to the Legendary Warrior and the Lieutenant, because they're at the same cost.
Yes.
But even they just behave differently. So I see, a lot of people playing the different versions.
Yep. Nope. Absolutely. So since we're talking about designing kind of a set, is there an easier part and a harder part of designing? And if so, what would be some of those obstacles that you come across?
Sure. Yeah. Well, let's see. In some ways, the easy part is throwing a whole bunch of stuff on the wall.
Let's see what sticks.
Like, Ken and Scott and Drew in some occasions, and myself, like we've got a lot of ideas. And so what we kind of do is we have like a bucket of stuff that maybe it didn't fit into the set, but to look at later on, or just if you came up with something, even when we're not in the design process, like throw it in there. So that kind of collecting ideas is easier, but that's also because we're early in the game.
Yeah.
That we try to plan and preserve design space to keep that being doable. The more difficult part is probably actually the most difficult part is absolutely just kind of like the numbers on the characters. We put out a lot of characters each set.
Oh yeah.
Right? And there isn't an expectation that they're all going to be, the top tier or anything like that. Like, we don't really have that expectation because, one, it doesn't seem very doable, and two, it's just not really necessary.
Right.
A lot of people will play, what they have and what they think is fun. But it is still better to shoot for that mark. And it can be really tough. And we sometimes get into positions where we just are extra cautious. We try to be more, I think, conservative or cautious than crazy. The only or than like liberal on some of that stuff. The only issue is that it only takes one or two like liberal
Yeah.
uh, things to kind of overshadow the conservative stuff. So it can be tough, and I would say that's definitely the toughest part because every character has four different numbers on them. They have health, defense, attack, and star cost,
Yeah.
and that's without any abilities. Like that's tough to deal with sometimes, especially since we have a desire when we're making a set to make sure that there's variety in the numbers. Like we could probably get away, and I know that I have in some products. Like when I was designing the Soundwave versus Blaster product, I just upfront told myself, guess what? All these cassettes they're going to be 319s. Like because it's not going to make much difference, and they're just going to be based on their abilities anyway.
Yeah.
So I want to make it more clear cut, and I don't want to make a mistake and make one of these guys a lot worse than the other because stats happened or what have you. I misjudged how good the ability was.
Yeah.
So we could do that more, but we have a desire to have more variance, so that will entail even make it even more difficult to make sure the numbers are correct.
Yeah, and I can imagine that a lot of that stuff will go up and down based on if you add a cooler ability to a character and you're like, well, now this becomes more powerful. We need to up the star cost to kind of match. So there's definitely, like you said, that
Yep.
balancing act trying to make sure that it fits. And then also, I'm sure there's the design part where you're trying to avoid a specific team or trying to avoid locking, one character into a better slot than other characters in the game. So again, like you said, that variance.
Yeah, it can be tough, especially since if we do about, say, on average like 40 characters in a set. On average, though, you're only playing 3.5 in any given deck.
Right.
So we know that every time we're increasing the amount like substantially, right now there should be, like, after this next set comes out, there's going to be over 200 characters
Yeah.
to choose from.
Mm-hmm.
But you're only looking to play 3.5 on average in your deck. That's okay for us because we expect lots of players to play different characters or to have multiple decks, right? That's
Yeah.
kind of the fun thing.
I will say I have quite a large collection of decks, absolutely.
Exactly. That's a lot of the fun for me, and especially in an IP driven game where it's like, oh, you have different reasons to make a deck about a character sometimes where you're like, well, maybe none of the Star Screams are quite cutting it yet, but I have to have a Starscream deck. It's Starscream. So.
Oh, yep, absolutely. Yeah. We have a few players here that have built decks just purely around stories or comics versus having any care as to how competitive it can be. So I completely
Absolutely.
get it.
And I love that.
Yep.
I think that fills a nice gap, just for enjoyment. As long as we do a good enough job to not make everything just a blowout.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's one of the things I think
Yeah.
a lot of people at least try when a set comes out, when they see that character that they have a special thing with that they grew up with. That's the cool part with this IP, is that most of us grew up with Transformers and watched Transformers, so we have far more of an emotional connection to certain characters over others, to where we're always going to explore those in the card game, whether it's good, bad, or whatever.
Yep.
So since we're on the topic of it, do you have a favorite team or a deck that you like to play with on a regular basis?
Well, my nature is to build a lot of decks, which is part of my role on the team
Right.
for balancing. Is like I'm definitely like a deck builder, so it's harder for me to get attached to some stuff. But
Mm-hmm.
there's definitely things I like a lot more, like maybe because of the way it plays a little bit differently, or I just think it's cool. Like I like to play sometimes green light with 3 battle masters that she just like kind of suits up with over the course of the game.
Okay.
That's really fun. You go like Vanguard, Dazzle Strike, and let's see, we have and then Sights, right?
Oh,
So then you just kind of pick them up over the course of the game. Eventually, she gets all 3. They can't take them off her, and you're like, yeah, this is awesome. And I also like to play in that deck 3 of, gosh, sometimes even though I do all the names, sometimes I forget the name. I think it's Focus Fire.
Yeah, Focus Fire from the gold.
Which is the orange green. Yeah. So then, while collecting my battle masters over the course of the game, I'll also collect those 3 in my hand, so that I can do a big finish, flip her over to the bot side, play those 3, give her bold 6, but also +3 from the green icon, and
Oh,
do a big swing.
just one
It's not
punch
it's not a
something.
great deck, but it's fun. I also really like to play. I really like to play Cars decks with Lieutenant Bumblebee and Cliff Jumper,
Right.
and leverage the card advantage by playing things like Fog of War to basically lower like both players' output and then just pick it up back with my card advantage. Sometimes people play those characters and they have a plethora of card advantage, but it really didn't mean much
Yeah.
because they had too many cards.
Yeah, you
But
can't play.
if you're yeah, but if you use something like Fog of War, uh, you can, or maybe leverage something like Brainstorm to make sure you get multiple plays. You can do some cool stuff and actually use that card advantage to take over the game. So sometimes I'll play those two in like a blue shell, um, and then the seven drop it changes a lot, but
Yeah.
that can be really fun.
Well,
Oh, I have one other one actually.
what's that?
I don't know if this deck is good. I never get a chance to play against anybody, but
Oh,
I
all
never
right.
see anyone play it. So I do the first Jetfire,
Okay.
who I think is probably one of the most underplayed characters in the game, in my
I
opinion.
would tell you the Colorado crew agrees. We play it a lot, but that card is really good for people who are listening.
Yeah, the first Jetfire, and then I play the RC from Siege.
Okay.
So that's probably private RC.
Yep.
And then I use Aimless. Uh, and then Aimless is really the damage factor there because both RC and Jetfire have Bold to make sure that Aimless will activate if you're playing a strictly blue deck.
Right.
So you can do a ton of damage there, but alongside that, I'm also playing the Superior Plating and a couple copies of the Jetpack for Jetfire to pick up.
The Pierce 4 one.
Yeah, the Pierce 4
Okay.
and the Tough 4.
Okay.
So that he can pick it up and just suit up. And you play a bunch of Quartermasters because you really need that Aimless.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
but it's a really tanky deck in blue. Like that's quite a bit of HP or of health and defense. And I mean, if you can trigger, if like with the Bold, you guarantee the trigger on Aimless pretty much. And if you do that, you're doing a lot of damage.
Oh, absolutely. And anyone who's attacked into an Aimless in a heavy blue deck knows that it takes a lot to take Aimless down to begin with, let alone if you start to suit it up with the Tough 4 on a Jetfire, it's going to take you a while to get there.
Yeah. If you attack with Aimless, right, and then they attack Aimless back, you've milled, or you flipped in your scrap pile. You flipped like at least 7 cards at that point.
Yeah.
Giving you a pretty decent shot if you play something like Inspiring Leadership or something to make sure you have a Superior Plating in the yard. So then you flip the Jetfire, and then you attack with Jetfire, and you're like, okay, you want to go into this Tough 4 one instead? And they're like,
Yeah.
no, none of these options make sense to me.
that does sound actually really fun. I might have to give that one a try. So.
Yep, give it a shot.
All right. And then so I guess where would I segue to here? If you guys, I would imagine you guys celebrate internally when it comes to release parties and stuff like that, as far as like new sets dropping and all that kind of stuff.
Sure, yeah.
Do you have any specific memories about any of those that you guys have had, whether it's you guys are cracking packs or if it's just hanging out at basic party? What kind of fun stuff do you guys do with a new set's release?
Sure, yeah. I think, I don't know how often. I think John probably once upon a time shared an image from the kind of pre-release events we have.
Yep.
So we do always do those within kind of like the biggest room that we have in the building, which is usually where we run these sorts of things. And the first one, I think we had like 200 people show up to.
Oof.
And, with like almost nobody knew how to play the game, right? But they were interested in knowing how to play the game. And it was just really awesome and really exciting because that was, the first one. Like,
Yeah.
We had just got done doing all this work, trying to get this product together, and you never really know how well it's going to work out. And so we were really excited to see the company get behind that. So many people were interested. So I mean, 200 people. I'm pretty sure it was like 200 people, and that's quite a bit.
That is quite a bit of people. So, how since we're on the topic, how do you guys monitor your guys' local game scene for the card game, or are you guys kind of supposed to stay out of it?
I think that there isn't really exactly a rule to stay out of it, but sometimes when you work for a company, it's just kind of better to stay out of it. You don't want to
Right.
like create any sort of issues or just accidentally. You never know. Like sometimes people are risk averse. So I'm not that familiar. I am a little bit. I definitely watch
Yeah.
a number of Facebook groups all over like the country
Mm-hmm.
to see like if you look, I'm probably in like a Portland group. I'm in like an Arizona group,
Yeah.
the Washington group. Like I'm in a bunch of them just to like see what's up.
Yeah, just to kind of keep an
And
eye on it.
yeah, yeah. And I
Nice.
know that I've shown up to a couple pre-releases, and Drew has as well. Just I just gave out some packs, talked to some people, and that was a lot of fun. But I definitely don't keep up with it in like a scientific manner.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, since we've talked about some of like the good cards and some of the design and stuff like that, when it comes to you guys play testing, how has the meta that we currently have, or the more stuff that you guys see online, have you guys been able to figure out some of that? Is it more of what you guys expected, or has a lot of this kind of come as a surprise?
Sure. I'd say it's a mix of both, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
There are there are trappings or things that we don't exactly expect people to gravitate to as much as they do. And there's also maybe situations where we try like we want to nudge people in this direction, but we don't know if they're going to do it, right?
Yeah.
Like for example, I would say one thing that I might have expected but hasn't turned out is that um, we I was expecting a little bit more disruption type elements to be played.
Mm-hmm.
Each set, well, not each set, but every now and then I put cards that like discard cards from hand and that sort of thing. Even in the very first set, well, in the first set there's the most of them, but there's also things like System Reboot that I used to play a lot of because it was disruptive. Coming from Magic, making your opponent lose their hand, like change out their hand, can be really powerful.
Yeah.
Um, and so there are things like that I was a little bit surprised that more people weren't adopting. So what we were doing was trying to prepare people for more of the combo oriented decks.
Mm-hmm.
We're like, well, we want them to have these cards so that they can do things to fight these decks, and we think those decks are important because we need them to beat the decks that are just extremely grindy.
Oh yeah,
Like
absolutely.
like if you don't put on kind of pressure, the sort of pressure that combo does, then what ends up happening is that players might just gravitate to cards that are strictly damage related. So cards that prevent damage or deal damage,
Yes.
right? They'll just go on this one axis because that's the axis to win. But if there's another axis to win, which are combos, then suddenly you have to fight that axis, which includes things like disruption.
Yeah.
So we need that to a degree to help solve for some of the more slower or just more straightforward things. And I'm a little bit surprised that people, and maybe there just isn't enough out there. I mean, in my own tests, I feel like it can be close, but if you're playing the right stuff, it can be really good. I know I've played versions of Twin Primes that were heavily disruption based,
Mm-hmm.
and did really well against any of the existing combo decks. Um, so I was a little surprised to not see people adapt those tools and kind of change what they're doing. But I know why it is. It's mostly because if not enough people do it, then still the damage oriented strategy is still going to be superior.
Yeah.
Like you're sometimes more likely to only play against those sorts of decks, so you don't want to be behind in that matchup.
Absolutely.
And it's just how metas work. So I was a little surprised about that. I'm also, I guess, a little surprised not to see some of the more wider Pierce oriented decks show up, but maybe they are and they're just not doing well enough.
Yeah, yeah. Our meta here, it's something that I've talked about quite a bit. It is different every day. I
Mm-hmm.
rarely bring a deck to an event where I'm like, I know this did really good last week. It'll do really good this week, because I will get completely crushed, because every single week all of our players bring completely random stuff. So
Yeah.
I understand.
That sounds fun.
Yeah, it is really fun, actually. It keeps you really on your toes, and then you'll see someone playing something, and you're like, oh, I didn't even think about that or notice that. And the really cool part is it just goes to show that there is a lot of variants and archetypes that this game actually does have, and it can really support, whether if you're a combo player or more of a control or an aggro. Like, it has a lot of stuff there to kind of fill your bucket as well, if you want to just kind of jump into that game style, you know?
Yeah. And I would say that outside of maybe some of the meta shifts that I was hoping to happen, um, we I think we did a pretty good job in our understanding. Like there haven't been any cards that are really good that we didn't know were really good.
Right.
uh, basically everything. Like if you see something and you're like, "Wow, that's really good," we probably intentionally made it really good. Usually that's the case.
Yeah. Yeah. No, the fun part that I find, and you were kind of talking about with the cards list a little bit, is that there's even a lot of cards that people don't even bother like trying out, because on the surface they have, some rough spots, or maybe there's just a better statted card in the same star slot. But like, I've been messing around with Barricade recently, and him in the
Oh
card
yeah,
list it's absolutely insane. Like the stuff that
yeah,
that guy can do is so incredible. And I originally was like, well, it's only for blank battle icon cards. So, and then I started talking with Discord, and they're like, no, you need to try him. And wow, that opened up my world completely. So it definitely is always a thing to, go back and sometimes mess around with some of those characters that you just don't on the surface think are really good. So
yeah. No,
yeah.
yeah, he's really good. I really like him too. He fits cool in that list. I like to sometimes play a version of that list that uses Barricade and either Lieutenant B or Mirage, and is trying to use I let's see.
Is it ready for action?
I still
Oh,
function.
I still
I
function.
still
Yep.
function with a new order. What is that card?
The in new orders, you get to untap that's a 6-star or fewer.
No, what's the one?
Oh,
Promote involuntary promotion. Yeah,
there
yeah,
you
yeah.
go. Okay.
So basically, if you're like, okay, I still function the Mirage, and then I'm gonna involuntary promotion him to get back another guy, and then that character gets to actually stick around, right? Or
Oh.
you can you could do it with Barricade as well. So
Yeah.
I've tried that. It's pretty fun.
Wow. That's actually really amazing. I like that. I like that.
It's a little bit of a combo, but
Hey, I'm all for it. So,
it's cool.
all right. So the
Oh,
next,
I'm
go
also
ahead.
a little surprised not to see what's it? Blur. Blur, like I know that Blur's a glass cannon, but some people like to play glass cannon decks. So
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
I'm
Yeah.
surprised never to see the Blur decks go
Yeah,
up.
I know I saw a few at the Energon Invitational, and I've seen a few at some locals every once in a while, and I agree with you. I think it's the whole glass cannon thing. If you get to go first, you usually find yourself in a
Yeah.
really good spot, but sometimes when you fight against some of those meteor characters, if he doesn't finish the job, it usually goes down pretty hard.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
But it is the one thing that I really appreciate the star cost on that character, because if he was anything lower, he would be all over the place. So,
Oh yeah. I think he was 9 at one point.
yeah,
And
and I'm sure that was insane. So, yeah, yeah,
yeah, I was like, no, this can't happen.
yeah,
Like as much as I like a character that is basically saying play lots of pump spells with me,
yeah,
it was just going a little bit too far.
yeah. No, absolutely. So next question I have, and this is more of a recent stuff, is it's about these new battle icons. So I know that there has been a lot of chat back and forth about it, and I know it's kind of confusing to people. So I figured if maybe having you here, you could kind of try to give it your best go as describing as to what you guys can do or not do with these new battle icons.
Oh, sure, yeah. Yeah, we definitely get it can be confusing. Part of what makes it confusing for people right now though is that they're not playing with them.
Absolutely.
They're just looking at them, and a lot of the decisions about them only happen when you're making your deck. Like and then it kind of like doesn't matter anymore.
Right.
For example, I'm not going to have a deck that has a bunch of these cards with all varying icons. I'm going to choose like one of them and make sure most of my characters can use it, right?
Absolutely.
So I think that makes it a little bit more complicated, and then in practice maybe it'll be a little less. But they are definitely confusing. But what they do really, they have two important strengths for us. One is that it lets us make more cards with more icons. We're always, really afraid of what can happen. I know in the very first set we had in early times of the first set we had a lot of double orange, right? And then Grimlock just would attack one character and then the game would be over.
Yeah.
Or we had a ton of orange blue, and then suddenly like the flips didn't matter anymore because I was playing a deck that was entirely orange blue. Right? Like,
Yeah.
There was some weird stuff. And we learned a lot of lessons when exploring the first set. And that said, we know that it's cool when there's more than one icon, right? There's room for three for a reason.
Oh, absolutely.
So I know that Ken tries to find basically whatever opportunities he can to put more than one on a card. Like that's kind of like his mantra is like if I can put more than one, he'll try to do so.
Yeah.
Because it's exciting, but like that's been happening for sets, and now like there's a reason that the Sky Patrol is really good right now. It's like because there's a lot of those green icon.
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
cards,
yeah,
right?
like bashing shield enforcement batons become infinitely better because of it.
Yeah. And if we were a little more restricted on those, then maybe they wouldn't be as good as they are right now.
Right.
So what this lets us do is I get to make another double orange, but make sure that Grimlock doesn't use it, or that sort of thing. So that's a really good thing about it. The other thing is that it's kind of friendly for limited in that, well, not just limited, but also limited collections. In that, if you've played limited, especially in the earlier sets, you've run into this thing where it's like, oh, this card says tanks only. I don't have any tanks, and now this card is really only good for maybe its icon. And that's kind of the opposite way that we want it to be. And these new icons let it be where we get to have a tank card, but the icon side is the tank. So you always get to play the card. You draft the card you get in sealed. It's still going to have its effect, but now the icon doesn't work. And that's, we think, a better situation than just the card doesn't do anything and it's in my hand and I'm looking at it and I'm upset about it.
Absolutely. Yep. Well, plus, like, to kind of piggyback on your talking about, like, the double icons, for instance, Peace Through Tyranny and Improvised Shield were always in every orange deck in the beginning, and then you always saw the, respective blue sides over there. And then it was kind of more of an understanding that those are really powerful at the double, so then we got to see you guys do full loadout and some of those other ones that had star costs attached to them. This kind of allows you, it seems like, to open the door, again, like you said, for more battle icons and not have to restrict it to, star costs or being blanks as far as what the abilities do. You guys get a little more design space.
Yep. And it's pretty cool. Like, there's we're not necessarily going to use it all in the set, but there's a lot of stuff we can do with it. And it's also pretty flavorful. I don't necessarily know if it's like a evergreen mechanic or whatnot.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's a very tribal oriented mechanic.
Absolutely.
And you can imagine themes that would run really well with that sort of thing, right?
Yeah, and the other fun part is, and it's something that I find it's really awesome with this game, is the flip mechanic when it comes to like attacking and defending. Is you never really know what's exactly on top of the deck, and then you go to flip that card, and let's say you're in the wrong mode and you happen to lose that battle icon, and then that one damage was really relevant, whether it was attack or defense. So I think it adds a lot of that fun value to the flipping part of the game, rather than it always being a you know exactly what's there and what's exactly going to happen. So.
Yeah, and that's the some cases that's the moment of excitement, right? That point of the game.
Yeah.
And also, it's there's a number of characters that are multiple types, right? They might be like ranged and melee.
Yep.
And these cards aren't just better for those characters. Like some of the tribal cards, like, oh yeah, now this guy gets to use this bot gets to use both of those types of cards, but that's not necessarily the case with these, because you have to have the timing right unless you plan on never flipping to the other mode.
Absolutely.
And they're actually a little bit better for the characters that are the same on both sides, because you can expect that they're going to work correctly.
Yep. And then the other fun part is that it might even be enough to push a character from being maybe not super playable in competitive to being now playable, because you get access to those battle icons, or even vice versa, where a character is really good, it might help bring some of them down because maybe you don't get access to those battle icons. So.
Oh yeah, and a class of these cards, like they get to be similar strength, not fully, but they get to be closer to the strength of a no battle icon card, which is like the most powerful cards in the game.
Yeah, absolutely.
Have no battle icon, right?
Yep.
And they get to be more similar to that strength than a single battle icon card, because they are similar to that. They're more similar to that because of that icon being a specific trait.
Yeah, absolutely.
So there's some good ones. I mean, obviously you haven't seen them all, and also maybe showing the Metallicado one early was a little weird, because I hope a lot of people aren't expecting there to be all these different type battle icons on there, because that's the card that does that. That's the one that's supposed to be doing that weird thing.
Yeah.
You don't expect that on like any of the other cards.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I definitely would imagine that maybe there's a couple of those in the wave, but
Yep.
Yeah, it definitely has. It's got a lot going on that card for sure.
Yeah, and yeah, that's supposed to be the card that's pushing the boundaries, where you're like, oh wow, what's going on here?
Yeah, that's pretty funny. Alrighty, so I feel like we talked a good amount about Transformers, so I wanted to ask a little bit more about you, and then I'm going to open the floor a little bit for you to be able to just kind of, chat about some stuff. But if you weren't, let's say, working at Wizards and you weren't working on Transformers, what is something that you would like to be working on?
Oh, sure. Well, let's see. My main hobbies, or the things that I'm most interested in, are comic books, trading card games, and fighting games, video games, Street Fighter.
Oh, okay.
Those are like my big passions.
Mm-hmm.
So I would probably be like, I'm working on a webcomic right now, but I'm not doing anything with it yet. It's not, nobody can see it.
It's because you're still finishing the art for it, obviously, right?
Yeah. But so that's something I'll be doing at some point. And so maybe I would be doing that now, or I mean, I'm obsessed with trading card games, so I would love to work on a Ninja Turtles trading card game.
Oh,
like that would be awesome.
Okay.
Hasbro has a pretty sour relationship with the Ninja Turtles.
Yeah, absolutely.
We've a competing relationship.
Yeah.
But if I weren't at Wizards, maybe I could finagle that into existence.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's another huge IP that I absolutely love is Turtles. So I could understand. I can understand.
Oh yeah, I mean, when it came out, there was nothing like it. It just changed the toy world entirely.
Absolutely.
And it was really big for pop culture, right? Like,
it's
one
huge.
of the funny things for me is I it's nostalgia or what have you, but I think back a lot on the early 90s, and I think about how we were all kind of into like gross aesthetic.
Oh yeah.
Like there was like slime on things, and I know that like when I was a kid, like I loved Swamp Thing.
Oh
I love
yeah.
Ninja Turtles. I love the Toxic Avenger. Like these were all things that were like their appeal was that they were like, I guess they're kind of like punk because they're like the
Different.
fringes of
Yep.
things. They're kind of gross. Like Garbage Pail Kids, that's late
Yeah.
80s or whatever, but
Yep.
that was like that stuff was all about gross things, and it's so funny to me that that was like a huge trend and it's totally gone.
That's funny. Yeah, no,
like
I
like the Ninja Turtles, like you looked at them and they had this mean face, right? That you looked at and they had all white eyes and they were just making this mean face. And none of my other figures were like that. They were all trying to be nice to me.
yeah, and all happy. Yep. And then the turtles are living in a sewer with a rat, and absolutely. Yep. Yeah. Yep. Yep. Okay, so since we kind of talked about it, are there any other games you play other than Transformers when you're kind of doing that kind of stuff, and I guess now Street Fighter as well? So
Yeah, I mean, I'm Street Fighter 2 is my favorite video game. Street Fighter 2 Turbo.
okay,
And I spent a lot of time on that. I used to I would have identified myself in the past as somebody who loved video games a lot, but I don't really play them nearly as much anymore. I think the last couple games I completed were just Dark Souls games,
okay,
which I love. But let's see. I mean, I play Magic. Magic is if there was one game that was like the greatest, most impactful thing on my life, it's probably that. So I would say just know that I play a lot of Magic, not
yeah,
as much as I used to,
yeah,
but yeah.
yeah. No, that's where most card game players, I would say, have at least gotten some experience in Magic. I know I played Magic hardcore for many years, so I can definitely
Yeah.
relate to a lot of people having to play that, especially if you've played any type of card game. It's usually you've dabbled with Magic at some point, so
hmm
it is definitely still to this day one of the most complex and awesome games you can play. So
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I always have nostalgia, but it also just gets better in a lot of ways over time too. So
yeah, absolutely. All right, so since we talked about superheroes a little bit, though, I kind of already know this answer, but if you were gonna be a superhero, you could be a superhero. Who would you be and why?
oh man, that's an interesting question. Well, my favorite superhero is Batman,
Hey.
but it seems like a lot of work to be him.
Yeah, I can understand that. Yeah, I agree. I agree.
No, I think on outside looking in, if I was like, this is the accomplishments I've had in my life, I would for sure want him to be Batman's accomplishments
Yep.
because he is he's the man.
Yep.
He does it all, right?
Yep. And to
There's a
go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
So I was gonna say that there's a interesting dichotomy for me. I'm a big superhero fan, right? I love comic books,
Right.
particularly DC comic books. Um, and I love Superman and I love Batman, and a lot of that has to do with kind of a meta relationship they have in that Superman is the first superhero like of the in the way that we know them now. Obviously, characters like Hercules and stuff in the past
Right.
were like superheroes. But as far as what we know today, Superman is the first superhero, and I always like view his relationships with that in mind. But Batman is extremely close, right? Like
Absolutely.
right after that, right there, and it's like he has this relationship in that he is not gifted any sort of like extra superpowers. I mean,
Yeah.
he has money, which a lot of people will equate to a superpower in some ways.
Yep.
But a big part of the point though is that it can be made. Like people can come into this situation. They don't have to be birthed into it.
You're right.
So it's super interesting to me. Just how this guy, and like they demonstrate this stuff a lot in like Justice League books where it's like, hey, what, this guy doesn't have any powers, whoa, but he still impresses me or he still outshines me, all that stuff. And and that's really a really awesome aspect of the character that other comic book characters can do every now and then, but they don't have the history to really pull it off.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and I'm a huge Batman fan as well. Like big Batman fan. So I completely agree with you. But I agree with it's the almost like obtainable part about it that makes you really love it so much is that it's something that you could achieve. It's something that you could reach for yourself. That you don't have to, like you said, be born with some type of gift. Is that you can hone a craft and you can develop and you can study enough to gain an advantage enough to still be a hero and not have to have super strength or be super fast or whatever. So
Yeah, yeah, and Batman's superpower is his insane will, right?
yep,
Like
yep,
that's what it is, and that is something that if you can try to incorporate or strive for in life, if you could just punch your will up,
yep,
it can it does a lot for you. It makes you happier and
yep.
all that.
All right, so out of all the Batmans, do you have a favorite version of Batman or from a specific comic line or any of those?
Oh man, um, let's see. Probably the Denny O'Neil stuff.
Okay.
I really like that stuff. I like the blue costume. I'll take any one of them. It's fine. He doesn't have to wear the blue costume, but I do like it.
Yeah.
And yeah, even though some of Denny O'Neil's stuff is more on the James Bond kind of
Yeah.
end of it,
Yeah.
I do really like a lot of it that is more, like all the Ra's al Ghul stuff. Like
Yep.
the detective version of Batman is my favorite for sure.
Yeah. I would
Though
agree.
I love Frank Miller. Like
Yeah.
his books are awesome.
Yep.
But he also likes detective stories, so he touches on them in a way that I appreciate.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the one that I find myself always going back and forth on that I really like, but it's always really weird is the Batman Who Laughs. And that whole
Oh yeah.
art style I think is really awesome. And then sometimes I'm like, this gets a little weird.
Yeah. No, oh that I mean
Yeah.
that whole run was awesome. Like
Yeah.
initially, obviously it's still going. But like Capullo is a freaking awesome artist.
Yeah.
There's a reason he was like one of the only people that McFarlane would like let do Spawn.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know?
Absolutely. It fits right
Like
in.
he's just he's fantastic. He does have, as everybody does, he has a style and he has stuff that you're like, hey, all these guys kind of look alike sometimes.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I love his art. He's excellent. I love Scott Snyder's stories. Sometimes it gets a little off the rails,
Yeah.
but I like Scott Snyder's really good. But I feel like sometimes he tries to reach a little bit further than he can. Like when Grant Morrison does that, I end up liking it for whatever swing he does. But sometimes when Scott Snyder does, I'm like, you're not Grant Morrison, Scott. Don't do
Yeah.
that. Stick to this part.
Yeah.
This part you do really well.
Yep. Yep. It's how you know you're a true fan, then when you can point out all those differences and stuff. So.
Oh, thanks.
Nope.
But I would say that Legends of the Dark Knight, that comic run,
Okay.
right,
Yep.
is just awesome. Like those are, they just bring in all the different writers,
Yeah.
do all these little like one shots or short stories,
Yep.
like short runs. But that is great, and I love that even though it's like early '90s, it didn't do the crazy like life-filled like art style that was crazy in the '90s,
Yeah.
right? It they rein it in, and it's it's kind of mystical. It's kind of horror. A lot of it stuff has like horror elements. So those, if there was like a run that I like completed,
It's
it would
that
probably
one.
be that. Obviously, I'd be happy to own Detective.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But if within my means or what have you, I would
Yeah.
love to have the full run of Legends of the Dark Knight.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so at this point, I'm going to open the floor for you up a little bit. Is there anything that you specifically want to talk about, dive into, or any of those other things?
Yeah, because I have a little bit of an affinity for Colorado because when I lived in. I'm kind of from Iowa.
Okay.
I'm from Washington, but I lived in Iowa for 10 years when I was a teenager.
Okay.
And we used to go to Colorado to camp.
Mm-hmm.
My friends and I, we just loved going into the mountains up there and stuff like that. So I have like an affinity there. So I'm kind of interested in what the gaming scene is like there, because I don't know anything about that. And maybe one day I'll move there.
Right. Well, we would more than welcome you here. That's for sure. So,
Thank you.
so the gaming scene here is actually really awesome. It's really strange, but like you can go to LA and you have such a massive city, but there's only like
Yeah.
2 or 3 game stores that most people will go to. Here in Colorado, there's probably 10 game stores within a pretty small distance. So there is really a lot of it going on now. A lot of game stores start to now divide essentially their player base for like, one game store hosts, more for D&D, and one player, one game store has more computer games, and then there's, your couple of big Magic stores, and then like we play at about 3 to 4 different game stores, depending if we're going like a little bit farther and going to play out in Colorado Springs, or if we're playing, more locally. I definitely travel to quite a bit of different stores to play, but we have at least for Transformers here, we have a pretty solid group of folks that, I mean, we play 3 times a week at least. Sometimes it's even more than that, where we are dedicated and we're out there and we're playing for 7-8 hours a day. So we have a pretty strong group here.
That's awesome.
Yeah, we did just have a big tournament yesterday, so I know if anyone was following on Facebook for stuff like that, I unfortunately couldn't stream it because the event just didn't have space for it, but we did have our Heroes Rise tournament, which is now going to be an annual tournament that I host, essentially, and we did it at a brewery yesterday, so people got to come over there, they got to get some good food, get some drinks, just have some really fun games, and, we get to kind of turn on the competitive a little bit, because normally we play test and we do a lot for big events. So like if we know we were about to go to PAX or Gen Con or whatever is going on, we turn on that, and then for Heroes Rise we turn it on. Then pretty much anything beyond that, every single day it is random meta, random decks. I've been beaten by Skytread, I've been beaten by General Prime, so it's always really random as far as what we have going on in our stores, at least. So
Oh, that's awesome. How many people do you say like shows up on the regular?
on regular, I would probably say we have I would say 10 people pretty regularly, and then we kind of go up from there if it's a bigger event, or sometimes we get some people that don't
That's
get to,
awesome.
yeah, we don't get to make it. We have people who now in our group are from Wyoming that we're starting to talk to. We've got some people, like I said, in the spring, so we're trying to branch out, and I know that I've got 2 learn to play events coming up here in some stores that I'm going to be doing some work with the local game stores to try to bring in some other people to at least get their hands on Transformers, because I've always said, I came back to card games because of this game. So, and I've played so many games. I know that when people just play the game, they automatically become hooked to it. So,
Oh, that's awesome to hear.
yeah.
I think that, yeah, like 10 is great. Like the store that I used to frequent, that was a big deal back home in Iowa. We would usually have about 8 or 9 for Magic or whatever other game. And one thing I really loved about the community out there was we were always willing to like try new games.
Yep.
And I'm curious if that's kind of the case with you guys' group, like if you're just, or if you guys are more drawn to specific games.
No, so we definitely have a lot of different stuff that we do. It's like some of our people, they play like even miniatures and paint, and then we've got some people that are really big into like computer games and stuff. And I know one thing that we've talked about doing here locally is doing a new night where like we bring out a new board game, or we just try something new as a little group and kind of just
Yeah.
see what goes on. So it is definitely something that we're going to be doing in the future. But no, we definitely have a pretty wide range of what we do, and we stay pretty connected too, which is really awesome. We find ourselves chatting at least every day, if not every other day, about whether it's reveals, or if it's about, oh, did you guys see this that happened over there, oh, I was really thinking about this kind of stuff. So we're always really collaborating, and it's one thing that I'm really happy for, because I know I wouldn't be able to have the channel and a lot of the videos that I have if it wasn't for the guys that we had here. So
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. That just supports everything, right? Because you're touching on stuff all the time. You have stuff to talk about, and you get to bounce ideas off your buddies, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. No. So I love the group here so much. It really is. It's really awesome. And like I said, we're pretty blessed to have the group that we have, and we're all big collectors of Transformers, whether it's toys or comics. It's something that we have a huge love for. So the game was just a really easy way to be able to connect all of us, because this game is what brought us all together as far as a group, because we, maybe cross paths at a con or something like that, but there definitely was no meeting anyone until this came out, and it was like, oh, you're playing too? Oh, you're a huge fan of that? And it goes from there.
Oh yeah, that's awesome. That's like a beacon,
Yep.
right? It's
Yep.
like you see a person that you've seen before, and maybe you talk to at the other stores, and you're like, oh wait, you're into this too. Like,
Yeah,
oh,
yeah,
that's
yeah,
awesome.
yeah, absolutely. And like I said, there's something about this game specifically that just makes people happier when they play games. And like I said, because I've played so many, so I've always known about how the metas can be, and the competitive sides can be, and the collecting side, and something about this game, it just rings true to so many different things, and everybody who plays it likes it. So our group is constantly getting bigger, and hopefully with those learn to plays that I do, it's just gonna be pushing it farther. So
No, that's fantastic.
yep.
I think that one thing that we're really happy, and I in particular, because of my experience playing all the other games, is that I just feel like Transformers is like sufficiently different from the other card games I've played.
Yep.
Like it just goes a lot further. Like I've played too many games that were like just a copy of some other game with a
Yeah.
new mechanic added on.
Yep.
And when I play Transformers, I'm like, oh, like a lot of the things I know like don't even apply here because the game is so different.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, like, and I mean, just
It's
a perfect example of that is like there's definitely like, I don't want to call them trap cards, but when you and play other games and you're like, oh man, drawing one card is like really really good in other games, so I'm gonna play this, and then
yeah.
you play it in this game, and you're like, oh, that one didn't really do a whole lot for me. So you definitely have to explore different things, and you have to like learn how to play this card game separately than how you've played other card games. So
Yeah, yeah. I know that when we were when we were working on the second set, right? Um, I know that there's probably in our database I think there's a note by Ken about universal network access that's like, oh, we're probably gonna regret this, I think is what it says.
yep.
But
Yep.
I was like, and this was at a time actually when Bolt of Lightning had a orange icon,
Oh.
and and I was like, Ken, no, in this game the lightning bolt is better. Like this card is better.
Yep,
And he was
absolutely.
like, oh. And then he ended up changing it. It's possible we could have left it, but we were a little bit conservative. But I was just like, trust me, this ancestral recall is okay.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
just trust me.
yeah, yeah. And at least luckily you guys did put a star cost on it, right? So you do still have to make
Yes.
space for it. It's not just you're gonna slam three in every single deck, because of course you would if that was the case, right? So
Yes. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it has balancing factors outside of that, but
yeah,
but
no,
yeah, it's super cool. Like actually, that was one of the things where when there aren't like any sort of like costing mechanisms in your cards, it can be really tough because you can't make like a ton of cards that are scaled on your costing system.
right.
So we're always kind of worried about design space to a degree. We're not like so worried. It
Oh
doesn't
yeah,
keep us up at night.
yeah,
But one thing that people were initially worried about in the first set was card drawing mechanics, and I think I probably made all the card drawing cards because I was like, no, these cards are all safe, and this is going to be a game where we're going to make a lot of cards that say this.
yeah,
Because like I know that in Magic it would be a big problem if that were the case, or a lot of card games it would be a big problem.
yeah.
But like we need this space to make cards, so we're gonna just take it. We're gonna take hold of it right now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the other really cool variants you have is that, like, because you're constantly flipping cards when you're attacking and defending and then drawing, you can't decide what you're going to draw off of it, right? There's a lot of times where you're like, oh, okay, well, I'll play this draw three, and you may not see the card that you want because two of them might be in the scrap already, and then there's a lot of variance with that to where the drawing mechanic is strong, but it is definitely not as powerful, so,
Yep. Yeah, there's still a lot of variance going on.
yep.
Um and I would say a sufficient amount.
Yeah. Yeah, you sit there and go to draw a card you're looking for, but it turns out it's under your Nemesis Prime the whole time. So, yeah,
Yeah, you got to be careful.
yeah. So there can definitely be some variance, but it's pretty awesome stuff. So,
Mm-hmm.
all right, is there anything else that you got or you want to talk about?
Oh, so you were saying that the game helped you get back into card games.
Yeah.
I'm curious about, because it seems like you went pretty early. Based on my experience, I know that you were putting out deck lists and stuff in the very first set online.
Yeah.
So have you done kind of content creation for other games you played, or were you just like, hey, I like this game enough and I know that this is a thing I might enjoy, so let's just get into it? Or
So like I said, I used to play Magic really hardcore. I used to travel around. I was in Star City Games, Grand Prix, a couple of Pro Tours and stuff. So I already had a lot of the understanding of a card game, I would say. I dabbled in a few other card games as well, trying to play on the more competitive side of things, and nothing really hooked me and had enough for me to want to jump into it. And then I saw, or I at least heard about this game, and then I saw the stuff at Gen Con, and I was immediately taken away from it. Like, the mechanics behind it, how it played out, and then obviously my attachment to Transformers was just kind of the icing on the cake. So I knew I was going to jump 100% into the pool with this game, and it ended up working out because I was talking to a friend that I've had for a really long time. I did a lot of stuff with him with Magic, and he goes, man, the way that you talk about this, your excitement about it, like, he goes, you should go back to doing videos on stuff. And I used to do a lot, I would say, on Twitch and do stuff like with just communicating with people. And so it was like, you know what, maybe I'll try it out and see how well it works. And luckily it's worked out really well. But it's definitely something that I have a passion for, is teaching other players, trying to bring information to the light, communicating about it. I feel like I have a really good eye for a lot of stuff. So I just try to make sure that everyone else can see the same stuff that I see. Because it's definitely pretty easy to miss a lot when it comes to playing a game and being like, oh, I didn't even know about that interaction. And it's like, now that makes that way cooler. And it's just a lot of stuff like that. So.
Oh yeah, that's awesome. I would have to concur that you are very very adept at that. There's a reason that I've liked having you with me in some of those events.
Yep, absolutely.
And on the coverage and stuff, because I think that you have a good eye on some of the things that are deeper than just surface level, right? Not everybody can get. Yeah, absolutely. And it's really good to be able to articulate in a way that other people will understand, right? Like, that's my goal whenever I'm doing coverage, is to try to tell the players watching about something that they can't just see on the table, right? That they might not know otherwise. And sometimes it's a tough balance, because if you go too far, then they're just like, oh, I don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
But
yeah, no, that's the way.
But I think that you do a good job there.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I've spent a lot of time, like, even with my normal job, with trying to do communication and trying to better understand that line, is like when you know that you have someone hooked versus when you know you've lost somebody. So it's definitely trying to navigate that really fine road on what's going to catch people's ears and eyes, and then keep them entertained as well, versus, like you said, going down that rabbit hole and then the person just doesn't know what you're talking about anymore or whatever. So it's definitely have those certain topics that you got to cover. So.
Yeah, and coverage is like, you're entertaining somebody and you're speaking with somebody without any feedback, right?
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
So it can be really hard. I can't see their eyes glaze over or
right.
Anything like that.
Yep.
So I'm really happy with what we had done in the events, because while there wasn't a ton of production, we had not a lot of time to do things or prepare for things.
Right.
But I feel like we still put out some good stuff. So thank you again for joining me in those times.
Yeah. And all the feedback that I've heard from a lot of the people that I chat with, they seem to really enjoy it as well. So I'm just glad that it's even an option, because I know we want to try to get more people watching this game and seeing that it's even a game, because I'll still talk to people in game stores who are like, Transformers has a card game? It's like, yes. So being able to even have that coverage for someone to go back and look at, and content creators to be able to do stuff, it's gonna obviously grow the community more by having more eyes on it. And so it's really good stuff. I'm a huge fan. And then having you guys there, I think, is an even bigger part about it. And it's something that I love you guys do, because a lot of companies, you lose a lot of transparency from the top down, right? So, you may have someone on the very top office who's really excited about something, and they tell someone on the bottom, and by the time it gets to the most people, a lot of that excitement, a lot of that energy is kind of washed out. Whereas having you guys at those events where people can come up and talk to you and see that you're even there, or hear you guys, doing coverage, it puts a lot of that fire into those people just naturally. So
Yeah, I think that we kind of stumbled into doing that a little bit,
yeah.
probably because it's like, hey, we have to do it because we don't really have the resources to get somebody else to do it.
Right.
And then it just worked out. We're like, oh, I didn't, we might not have realized how receptive people might have been to that sort of thing had we been in a more fortuitous position, and and been able to just send a whole bunch of people to run the event for us or whatever.
Right. Yeah, no, it's worked out, and hopefully those people who need to know how it worked out knows how it goes. And like I said, for everything from that I've heard is, like, the one of the coolest part about this community is the fact that you guys are active and you guys are a part of it. So I know that it helps out immensely.
That's awesome. Yeah, because we enjoy doing that. We like to do it, but we don't always know how people react.
Oh, absolutely.
So we're happy we can see that people do appreciate that. I'm also just really happy with the level of kind of content producers that have attached themselves to the game, because I don't know if this is just kind of like the new way of the world now, but I was really excited that as many people have and are producing such great content, um, because that in all the games I played in the past, I never saw that sort of stuff.
Yeah, no, it's definitely more of a newer thing, but the way that I've always evaluated it is, that's one way for you to tell that your game is good, whether you're a designer or you own it or whatever, is the more people that want to cover it, the more people that want to be a part of it. Obviously, there's room there for it to grow. People like it, so people are going to want to cover it. It's always the ones where you go to play this game and you've never heard about it and there's no one producing anything on it. Those are the ones that unfortunately don't get enough light to be able to even grow, whereas this game's going to get a ton of that. So,
Yeah.
yep.
It's really awesome.
Yep. All right.
I don't think I have anything else off the top of my mind.
Okay. All right. Well, shameless plug. Alrighty, so there is going to be our first podcast. Again, huge thanks to Matt Smith for sitting in on this awesome episode number 1. We're going to have other special guests coming to you guys as well down the future, so make sure you guys are subscribed so you guys can get access to all of that as soon as it becomes available. And if you guys have any really cool topics that you guys would like for us to cover in a future podcast, make sure you guys go down to the comment section below and let me know. I will catch you guys in the next one.